talk to the legends of the creative and entertainment industries. We talk to those on the rise. Steen Anthony Nielsen asks about the highs, the lows, and everything in between. This is Outcast Creative, and this is Industry Interviews.
Hello and welcome to Industry Interview 139. I won't be on camera today because I've got a little bit of a cold and I don't want to be blowing my nose constantly on video. But my guest will be, of course, and it's all about my guest anyway, so they're the person that you need to be seeing, not me. Before we get into the interview today, just a couple of other updates. So first of all, my last interview 140, which is my last one scheduled for 2026, is this coming Friday at 8 o'clock, and that is with Mauler, who is quite a well-known YouTuber, and we're going to be, I've been on streams and stuff with Mauler before, and he's even been a guest on the channel before, but I've never done an interview with him or about his career specifically, so that's kind of going to be the angle on this one. So it will be slightly different from when I've had him on the channel before, and should prove pretty interesting. Also, I've got on the 30th of December, we have the roundup of the best and the worst of 2025. Which films and TV shows we think, my panel, that is, that you should be watching, and which films and TV shows should you avoid at all costs? We're mainly going to focus on the positive stuff, which is what we tend to do on this channel. And we've got the Nielsen ratings tomorrow, which is going to be a Rob Reiner special. We're deviating from the normal format tomorrow to celebrate and talk about the work of the late Rob Reiner, who, of course, I don't want to get into all the details, but obviously him and his wife passed away under the most tragic of circumstances this weekend. Just truly, truly awful. And this man and his work is a huge part of my movie journey. Several of his films are in my book, Silver Screen Journeys. So if you got a copy of that and you look through the pages, you'll see a couple of the books are in there. A couple of his films are in there. Of course, he's well known for creating the legend that is the film This Is Spinal Tap, which is one of the funniest films of all time, a lot of people would argue. So we'll be doing a breakdown of the best films of Rob Reiner tomorrow night at 10 o'clock, and talking about his career and reflecting on his work, and also his acting career as well, which is perhaps gets a bit less attention. So do join me tomorrow night at 10 p.m. with a panel of guests, and we'll be getting into that. Right, back to this evening. So, as you all know, it's the job of the channel, the role of the channel, to support emerging creatives wherever we can, in whatever field they might be working in. Sometimes we have musicians on, or DJs. I've had actors on, various people in various crew positions, and of course I've had people at the very top of their game, established film directors and producers and stuff like that, to people just starting out. And the great thing about the channel is we're here to support people that are just starting out. So when I put the call out earlier this year for people to get in touch with me if they had a project they wanted to talk about that was at a state of readiness, there always needs to be something that we can see and show people. Several people got in touch with me, and I've had nearly all of them on now, except for M K Stangeland, or Michael, as I'm going to refer to him. Thank you very much for joining me. And you're here to talk about your book, Junkworld, The Ballad of Leroy Brown. I love that title, by the way.
Yes. Thank you for having me on. And also a brief shout out thank you to the Critical Drinker for his role in helping make this happen. But yes, my book, my debut published novel, is called Junkworld, The Ballad of Leroy Brown. It's a science fiction book that the gist of it is you have this military robot turned arena fighter that's basically at the top of his game. He's an undefeated champion, but after winning a critical, important fight, he's turned off for maintenance, but when he's reactivated, he discovers that he's wound up on this junkyard planet, and obviously, based on where he was beforehand, he's certain it's a mistake. So he makes it his mission to get back to where he was, but in the process of that, he gets entangled with this conflict that's going on this planet where a robot known as the Top Dog, when he learns about Leroy, he wants Leroy for reasons that's known only to this robot. So Leroy's mission to go home and this conflict on this planet get intertwined. And so the story goes on about that. And it's ultimately kind of a story that looks at what decisions do you make when your life gets upended? The way I like to put it is, imagine you have your life all nicely laid out on a table. You know what's going on. You know where things are. And then life comes along and completely flips that table over and scatters everything. How do you respond?
Well, that's interesting, because I think that's happened to my life on about 4 separate occasions, each with their own fairly major consequences. So I can certainly relate to that. All right, I've got a ton of questions, but before we dive back into your book, on my interviews, because I'm a filmmaker and my background is in film production, I always ask every guest, regardless of their own background, a couple of movie quick-fire questions. So you are no exception. Can you tell me the very first movie that you saw at the cinema as a kid, as far as you can remember?
All right. So the first movie that I can definitely remember seeing in theaters is The Lion King. It's possible I saw other movies before that, but that's the one that I can definitively say I saw in theaters as a kid. And one of the minor things that sticks out about that memory is that, I mean, as anyone who remembers The Lion King, is that, it was a pretty big deal. So the first effort the family went to see it, we actually went to a sold out screening and then had to go to a later screening later.
Right, yeah, that's the sort of thing that tends to stick in your mind. That movie was huge. I remember when I went to see it, it was massive. It was packed out. It was it was a massive hit.
Yeah, and
it was the biggest hit Disney had for some time.
Yeah, and even today, if you watch it, it's not hard to see why it was such a big hit, even when it first released.
Yeah. And in fact, you're the third, I think, of my 140 interviews. I think you're the second or third person who's cited that film as the first film they remember seeing at the cinema. What was the last movie that you went to see on the big screen that you paid for a ticket to go and see?
Well, the most recent movie I went to see in theaters shares a bit of an unusual personal connection with the first movie, in that in both cases they're not movies that I chose myself. In both cases, it's a decision that a family member went. In the case of when I was young, it's because the parents picked the movie to take the kids to. In this case, it's because there was a family member who wanted to see it, and so I decided to go with. And that movie is Wicked for Good, which I saw because my mom, she wanted to go see it. As she explained, she was an Oz fan, especially growing up. And she's one of those, especially with this whole movie stuff, she's more of a mainstream, more casual movie goer. So,
sure.
And so I went and saw it with her last year. She wanted to see it, and I saw the first one with her. She wanted to see this one. I went and saw this one with her as well.
If you were stuck on a desert island and for a year, and you could have 10 movies with you to watch during that time, let's call it 10 DVDs. Tell me 3 movie titles that would definitely make that cut for you.
Oh, that I might have to think about, because I could default to what are my favorite movies, but then on the other hand, I have to wonder, okay, are my favorite movies necessarily the movies I'd want to watch on repeat
again
over
and
the
again?
Course of a year?
Well, think of it in terms of movies that you tend to watch at least once a year.
Well, if I were to just go by my favorite movies, I think I could I would probably fill out most of the roster with the 6 George Lucas Star Wars movies, and then the first Incredibles and Galaxy Quest.
That's a great. I mean, that's 3 great choices right there. I assume you mean the original Star Wars trilogy.
Well, I'm talking about like the 6 Star Wars movies that George Lucas made, the original trilogy, and then the 3 prequels.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's a great selection right there. Let's move into the world of books a little bit. Now, these are still quick fire questions, so just give me the shortest answer that you can. Do you remember the first book that you picked up and read, as in a novel, as opposed to like Asterix the Ghoul or something like that?
No, I don't think I can remember the first book that I read myself.
The first one that made an impression on you, perhaps? For a lot of people in my generation, it was The Hobbit or Lord of the Rings.
I would say an early book that I remember. Well, do books that like your parents read to you count?
Well, it depends if it landed with you. If your parents read it to you, but it really stayed with you, and then maybe you picked it up again as an adult, that would definitely count.
I would say, I'd say an early book that left a memory with me would be the C.S. Lewis Chronicles of Narnia book.
Yeah, that was one of my first.
Yeah, particularly the first written, The Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Great book.
Yeah, but you mentioned The Hobbit. Funny enough, my initial experience with The Hobbit is by the Rankin Bass animated movie, where I didn't actually realize there was a novel until after I had seen that animated movie.
Yeah, that's kind of an interesting movie, that one. What was the last book that you picked up and read?
Oh, let me trying to remember. I will say one book that I have read in the relatively recent past is actually the Dante's Divine Comedy, which I actually read as kind of a research thing for a different book I was considering working on, and where I thought, maybe there's something here where I thought it'd be a good idea to maybe go back to the actual source material.
Mm-hmm. And have you got a favorite book of all time?
Yes, my favorite work of fiction, and I recognize this is going to be a bit of an outlier, but it's actually a licensed Star Wars book.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Starfighters of Adamar by Aaron Alston. That's been a personal favorite of mine since I was a kid.
How many times have you read it?
Oh, I don't know how many times I've read it, but I think one of the things that sticks out is that, for example, when I went on a trip several years ago and that included a plane ride, it was the book I took with me to read when I thought, okay, maybe I'll have nothing else to do. Yes, that right there. I actually have, I have a copy from before it got labeled with the Legends title. But yeah, it's my single favorite work of fiction. And it's, if I like, you asked the question, if you were stuck on an island with and you had to pick 10 movies to take with you, Starfighters of Adamar would definitely be on that list of books I'd take with me. No question.
Yeah, one of you. Yeah, that's a standalone story. I assume you don't need to have read any other offshoots. Cool.
It's kind of both, because it's a story that works entirely on its own. I mean, it's a story that works even if you don't have any understanding of Star Wars, but at the same time, it's also part of a larger series, and for several years, it was the last book in its series. So it's very interesting in that it fits into both roles, and it also interesting in that it definitely fits within the Star Wars universe, but at the same time, it's a book that you could remove it from Star Wars and it would still work.
Yeah, fair enough. So, we could, if we go down the Star Wars rabbit hole, which I'll avoid. Otherwise, we'll be talking about that for our allotted time, and then suddenly we've got 5 minutes to talk about your book. let's go back to the beginning of the writing process. I'm going to guess when you were young, you were probably one of those people that started sort of playing around, just sort of either writing short stories or trying to develop ideas for a book. What was the thing that made you make the leap, and how old were you when that happened?
Well, it was something, I mean, I was very young when I started doing stories, and
that's normally the case.
Well, yeah. And there was a mix of, some of them were just simple stories that I developed myself. And then also there was some where I toyed with what would now be considered fan fiction, even though it was back before I even understood it. And I think even long before it was really understood. Like the two earliest kind of stories I remember writing one was this basic story called The Flying Trees, which was basically my family reimagined as trees that could just lift up and fly wherever, and kind of stories about that. And then on the flip side, basically basic stories that basically fan fiction for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Oh yeah. I used to own the role-playing game for that, which I think came out before any of the novels. There was the comic, then the role-playing game, then the movie.
Yeah, that's another fun thing where you learn about one thing and then learn about where it actually came from later. Like my introduction to the Turtles was the original animated series that kind of blew up the popularity, and it was only later that I realized that the comic books weren't based on the TV series, but the TV series was actually an adaptation of the original comic books.
That's right. Yeah, that's kind of, well, I mean, that's often the case. So the leap from doing those kind of first early efforts, which, you know, they tend to mainly end up being for ourselves more than anything, to see what we can do. How old were you, and how long ago was it that you took the leap and said, right, I'm gonna write my first novel, and, you know, let's talk through that. But how long did that take, from making the decision to actually sitting down and getting on the computer?
Well, I see two primary influences in that regard. The first, the earliest one, and this probably won't be a surprise given previous discussion, but George Lucas, that was an early inspiration. What he managed to put together with his own work, especially as someone who managed to basically live the dream of having his own creation, and unlike most people on that scale, owning his creation in this world he'd created. And that was an early influence. And then the other influence that really got me, that kind of solidified my current trajectory, is for people who remember it, the web series Red versus Blue. Because when I saw that, there was a part of me that said, I want to do that. Now, it didn't wind up going that direction, because as I quickly learned, actually putting together like this online video series, even when you're using a video game, because for people who don't remember or who have never heard of it, Red versus Blue was this online series where they took a video game and you basically used it as an kind of an animation tool and made a comedy series. But even so, it still got me on this track, kind of solidified this track where I was actually continually trying to write something, and those where, to the point where I did in fact write an entire season's worth of episodes. Now, how good they are, that would definitely be questionable, but sometimes it's just a matter of actually getting something completed. Yes, just like that. And this was back in the days when they were just arguably niche, but I mean kind of niche, but still big. Like they had this influence, but at the same time they were kind of this small, just like a small internet entertainment company. So
I remember this. I do remember this show being out. I remember people talking about it and saying it was quite good and sort of leading the way in animation, you know.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's really impressive what they did, especially if you look at some of the behind the scenes information. In particular, like with the first 5 seasons collection, the behind the scenes, there's, for example, their later seasons, they're explaining, okay, they're using genuine movie techniques like that forced perspective to create 2 characters who are roughly the same size, or one's even bigger than the other, and without any special effects, without any special editing, still create the appearance that this character that's probably like the alien, the elite model, make it look like a baby just by the movie angle, just by the angle the camera's at.
Yeah, it was very much inspired by the Halo series.
Oh yeah, it's definitely, and they definitely had a connection with Bungie and the Halo people, especially after they managed to blow up with their initial popularity.
Yeah, well, you would hope so, because they probably would have got sued otherwise.
Yeah, and that was one of their initial concerns, but fortunately, it didn't turn out that way.
So you took inspiration from this, and you were writing stories set in this world.
Well, not set in that world. It's more, I mean, I set it in my own world, but it's still taking the inspiration. It's still the same logic of, you could take a video game, in particular the Halo series, and use it as an animation tool to tell a story.
Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah.
So how did that segue to you doing your first book and sitting down and going, right, I'm going to create a first draft of my own property? How long did that take?
It was, well, from that to this book, Junkworld, it's a several-year process where after I had these scripts written, but realized that, actually filming was easier said than done. My initial process was to try taking those scripts and turning those into a story. And from there, it's okay. When that didn't pan out, I just kept going to one story after another for a several-year period of time. It was going through the traditional process of write the story, get a draft you like, see if you can find an agent. Hopefully an agent likes it, but then, hey, no agent wants it. Well, I'll put the book on the shelf and I'll go try something else. And that's how I went for several years until I finally got, and this was originally one of those books where I wrote it, I went through the traditional process, I couldn't find an agent, but I still believed in the book. I still thought the book had value, so I put it on the shelf and reasoned, well, I'll come back to it later. Well, then, as it so happened, later, now, my current living situation is that several years ago, I started living with my grandma as a kind of in-home caretaker situation.
Right.
And my grandma, I mean, we pay attention enough that, I mean, she knows what I'm trying to do with this writing and trying to get this writing off the ground, but that I hadn't really found any success yet. So she started asking about the process, and specifically if there was anything she could do to help. And when she's offering to help, well, that's not really something you say no to. So I decided, you know what? Okay, this traditional process isn't working out for me. So I'm going to take a leap into the alternative methods, such as self-publishing, or as I eventually got to, hybrid publishing, which is a middle ground, as it kind of suggests, where I'm still doing all kind of the decision making as far as how this book comes out, but there's another company that I pay that does the heavy lifting into actually assembling it into a publishable novel and making it available for people to purchase in physical format. And so,
are you still, sorry to interrupt, are you still using that middle ground company, or was that back in the day that you used that as opposed to now?
Well, for this book, I used one company, and I'm working with a different company for my next book, though Junkworld is still available with the company that I originally worked with for it.
Right. Okay. So let's break down the heavy lifting. You do a manuscript, obviously chapters broken down and all the rest of it. You pass it on to them. I'm assuming that you're talking about they do the formatting, the spacing for you. Presumably they also do the proof checking. Do they do editing on top of that?
Well, the editing for this book, once I knew I wasn't going to go through a traditional publisher who would take care of those fine details, I actually hired an independent editor who went through the process first. So when I handed this book, so when I sent this manuscript to this publishing company, the book was already edited, but they did take care of such things as getting it properly formatted for being in a file that could be downloaded or could be printed off. They got
it print ready. This is probably back in the day before, you just had to upload stuff to Amazon and it was all kind of done for you.
Well, look, I don't know the intricate details of how all that stuff works, which is one of the benefits of being able to find a company like you being able to find a hybrid company, such as in this case, Beyond Publishing, that does know the details of that, which allows me to focus on the creative side of what do I want this book to look like, while they can worry about the fine details of how do we make it available where people can actually purchase it and it looks like a product people would actually want to buy.
So when you're writing the book, are you on a Mac or a PC?
I have pretty much been on Mac my whole life. That's the computer I've grown up with. I mean, I've had to deal with Windows and other circumstances, but
okay. So what software are you using to write a manuscript?
Well, I have been with Microsoft Word as long as I can remember.
Okay, so you haven't used something like Vellum, for example?
No, I mean, maybe other programs offer things, but thus far, stuff like Microsoft Words, it's quick, it's simple, I know what I'm doing, and it doesn't require a lot of intricate details that I don't want to have to try and mess with.
Yeah, I mean, I get it, especially if you get used to doing. Us writers can be quite pernickety, and one of the things you've got to be careful about is not putting barriers in front of us that will stop us from doing the important bit, which is creating, which is writing.
Yeah,
but,
I mean,
but there is a benefit to using, say, for example, so the software that I use, which I'll show you in a second, is called Vellum. It's specifically designed for the Mac. You buy it once, you never pay to update it or anything stupid like that, which you have a lot of things on subscription now. This one is not on subscription. If it was, I probably wouldn't have bought it. And
yeah, I totally understand that mindset.
Yeah. And well, the good thing about it is it formats it all for you. So what you do is you write it in the traditional way. I mean, you can even write it on a different piece of software and then upload it to Vellum. But I just write it straight into Vellum now. So this is a Vellum layout. So this is, if I just click on one chapter here, this is the chapter on the left. You can also insert pictures into it as well. And this is my book about going to the movies 125 times. And then on the right here is what it actually looks like in print. So you can see where the pictures will end up and what they'll look like, and you can choose the size and so on. And also you can adjust the spacing, the line spacing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, this is probably, a lot of this stuff is probably what your Beyond Publishing guys do for you. But one of the benefits with something like Vellum is it does do a lot of the heavy lifting as long as you know which buttons to press. So it's whether you want to take the time to learn a piece of software with the buttons, and that doesn't appeal to everybody. I get that, but I've used this from day one. In fact, I was a PC guy, and I specifically bought my Mac so that I could write books. And somebody said, "You need a Mac. You need Vellum. If you get Vellum, trust me, you're going to love me." And I was like, okay, I hate learning new software. Because I have terrible memory issues as it is. So I joined a writers group on Facebook. There were a couple of people that were in there who used Vellum regularly. I was very nice to them. I befriended them. I added them to my friends list, which they probably regretted, because for the next 2 years, I was constantly messaging them with, how do I do this bit? This bit's gone wrong. What's happening? But over time, with repetition, you get to grips with all these things. And it has all the separate sections like the forward and the copyright screen and, you know, the afterward and your acknowledgements list and about the author. And then you can add all your extra titles in the end. So it's a very, very useful piece of software. So when you said you're on Mac, I thought, well, I better mention it to you in case you've never heard of it before. It might be something you want to look at in the future, you know.
Yeah, I'm admittedly one of those people that prefers like a more simple direction when you're dealing with that kind of stuff. Like I'm one of those people that's never jumped over to the smartphone.
I get you.
Because I mean, a big reason for that, not the only reason, is because I prefer my phone to primarily be a phone. So when you've got these smartphones, I look at them. Well, it's basically just a handheld. It's basically a handheld computer, which is great. But I kind of prefer my phone to remain a phone and my computer to remain a computer, to kind of keep them distinct. And then you got like modern day vehicles that feel like computers on wheels. And my thought is, look, I just like a basic car, please. Thank you. Which it's, I mean, admittedly,
I get where you're coming from completely, because I don't have any social media on my phone for exactly that reason. Because when I go out, I don't want to be on my phone. And I think as writers, it's very important for us when we go out to look at things and look at people and observe people and see the landscape of the world, rather than getting that view through our phone, which is a very polarized view. Somebody else is telling you what to look at. If you go out of your house and you're not on your phone, you're choosing what to look at.
Yeah, admittedly, it's a bit of a weird position to take, given that, you know, this novel I wrote is about robots and it's about machines, where, you know, it's a junkyard planet. Once you get past the introductory chapter, every character in it is a robot. But I think it's one of those things where sometimes your idea of something is kind of distinct from how the reality is. It's like one of the things I think about when I was growing up is that initially, before I really settled on being a writer, a storyteller, my initial thought was, when I grow up, I want to be an astronaut. But then I learned that being an astronaut is not like what I envisioned it to be, where I envisioned an astronaut and I thought of things like Star Trek or science fiction. But then I realized, no, that's nothing what it's like. And that actual astronaut, I mean, what I'd actually want was not in line with what likely was ever going to happen in my lifetime. So
no, I hear you. So when you first sat down and wrote this book, which, as you say, is told from both your protagonist and your antagonist in the book are essentially robots. So it's already quite a unique and interesting perspective compared to a lot of science fiction novels. Did you plot out the entire story in like a treatment or synopsis first?
I did primarily write out, and I wrote a basic plot outline where I knew the gist of this is going to happen, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, and so on and so forth. That there was that, and a combined with I was kind of writing an initial outline in my head. So these two things kind of came together, and then once I had a solid idea of where the story started and how it was going to end, and, you know, how it gets from beginning to end, that's when I wrote the first actually written draft, where I had a story on paper that, even if it needed work, was still something a person could read.
Yeah, I follow you. So from the point that you did your treatment to then sitting down and writing the first draft to finishing the first draft, how long a period of time was that? I
can't remember at this point.
I mean, roughly, are we talking years, months, or weeks?
Well, I'd say for one draft, it's a period of either several months, possibly a year, somewhere in that range.
Okay, and how many pages is the book?
I can't remember, but I've actually got it on my shelf if you can give me a moment.
I can, absolutely. So for those people just joining us, my guest today is
right on
writer M K Stangeland.
Yeah, so
talking about his science fiction novel Junkworld, The Ballad of Leroy Brown.
Yeah, the book is roughly 324 pages if I'm just going by
Okay.
the page count at the bottom and aren't
around the 300 page mark.
Yeah, 320 or so pages, read.
Yeah, don't feel bad. My first novel was just shy of 400, I think it was. And I knew it was going to be epic, but there's nothing worse to put off potential publishers than giving them a massive, thick novel. If you give them a really thin novel with really short chapters that is a quick page turner, that's what they love.
Right.
If you give them something that's a bit meatier, they're like, "Oh, not sure about this." But
yeah,
I mean that's a different.
Yeah, I mean, and the way I look at it, it's not just a matter of page count, but it's also word count, and that can change based on how you arrange it. But I think, but for me, the bigger thing, and I think one of the biggest things that got in the way for finding an agent at writing a book that I thought would work well, is that when I'm approaching the contents of a story, I'm not looking at setting a length. I'm looking at how long does the story need to be to tell the narrative that is meant to be told. Now, there is, of course, room in there where you can add more detail or figure out or take stuff out. But at the same time, I mean, if a story needs to be a certain length to get a certain narrative across, well, then it needs to be that length. And if that length is too long for the story, well, then maybe you need to really do a rework of the story. But figuring out this is the exact length that needs to be is not one of my strong suits.
No, well, I mean, I think often when we start, we don't know, do we? Sometimes things take a certain direction, or if you write, even if you plot, but you still allow yourself to be organic, which you always should do, to the forces that kind of create and shape the novel as you're going along. It's like, oh God, yeah, this would be really good. And then the next thing you know, you've got a whole subplot that you didn't know was going to be there before. And with this book in particular, I kind of had a similar experience, not with a subplot, but with an entire character, where when I wrote out the outline, when I was writing the first written draft, well, I came to a point where I needed to insert a character because Leroy is on this land ship. That's one of these things, it's a big kind of a ship thing, but it travels on treads. And well, when you have you have something like that, the ship needs a captain. So I just inserted a captain. And then even though this captain character didn't make the initial outline, he developed into one of the most important characters in the book, a character who, he's arguably a main character in his own right, or where the book, if I really wanted to rework it, could make it his story instead. That's based, and I look at him, if you think of two kinds of storytelling, either, the plotter, you make things up beforehand, or you just make things up as they go. He's kind of like a pantser character in a plotter story. I got you. Yeah. Is he a human character, or is he another?
No, he's a robot. Like I said,
he's another robot. So all the characters on the planet are robots.
Yes, there is that introductory story that is important in there because because without it, I don't think you can really get the sense of this is what Leroy wants to get back to, and this is why Leroy considers this world important. There's other elements that are important for why the story, but once you get past that chapter, every character that you encounter in this book is a robot.
Right. Yeah. Well, when you were writing the first draft, another question for you, which I always like to ask writers, did you create a separate document? I call it, it's not a technical term, it's just my term. I call it a character beat sheet. And every time I create a character, whether they're a waiter or whether they're the key assassin in a story or whoever they are, I put them on that beat sheet. And then every time I learn something else about them, i.e., are they arrogant? Are they cautious? Are they tall? Are they slim? Are they fat? What do they eat? Every time I impart that information on the page, it goes under the character. So that becomes, on the beat sheet, there's this list of characters. Gradually, I have all this information about them that's expanding, and I can constantly go back and refer to it so I don't start breaking the rules of that character. Oh yeah, this one, he wouldn't do that in this situation because he did this before or she did this before. Is that something you do to keep track of your characters?
For this story, I didn't.
Okay.
That's not something I don't think I've ever done that necessarily for characters. There's another set of stories I've worked on where I've developed like a world or universe document, but I don't think I've ever I'm not sure if I've ever tried for a major story I've worked on creating a document that really lists out the characters and their personality traits like that.
What does a world/universe document look like to you? Is it just a big treatment about where the book is set, or is it done more with headings, a bit like an encyclopedia of that world with the key things? You know, this is the Star Federation, this is who they are. You know, this is the House of Klaus, and this is who they are. Is it more like that?
It's more the encyclopedia form where I like for example, there's another book couple books I've written that are in that. Well, maybe hopefully I can get back to them later. Where it is kind of like an encyclopedia document. Like multiple of them actually. Like I've got one document that here's a kind of an outline of here's what I envision for the history, like a brief listing of the history of this universe, or here's a list with different planets in this universe, so I can go back to them. Here's a list of alien species with their various traits. And it's very much kind of more like encyclopedia articles, but I guess more with I don't know, maybe an editorial. They're not written, it's more kind of a guidebook kind of thing.
So, but in a way, you're doing the same thing that I did with the characters sheet, because you won't write all of that in one go. That'll be an evolving document that you'll keep adding extra information to as you're going along, right?
Yeah, I would say based on your description, that does sound similar. Like it sounds similar to your character documents, but for a different topic. So kind of the same thing, sure. Probably.
How big did that document in terms of pages end up becoming for this novel?
Well, for this novel, it didn't get any of that treatment. There's just the various drafts of the manuscript where if I wanted, I could go back to that first written draft and pull up stuff. But for this book in particular, there doesn't exist a written information form.
Okay, is that a technique that you're applying to the book that you're writing now?
Well, the book that I am writing right now, that's almost ready, that also didn't get a that kind of building treatment. It's definitely something that it's on a case-by-case basis of how much of that kind of stuff I do.
Sure. I mean, is there anything that some people create mood boards. This is something that's done in film production quite a lot. You know, people will get 20 images, put them on the board and say these images represent the world of the film we're trying to create in terms of tone and contrast and look and feel and emotion and this kind of thing. I just wonder if there's any kind of technique that you apply, not necessarily that one, that you use to help either fuel your creativity or to keep track of it. For example, on my science fiction novel series, which is called Diamonds in the Sky, it's about alien ships arriving on the Earth, which should be happening pretty soon if you believe the news. With that, every main character in that book, I picture a certain actor as that character. So Rhys Darby, who is a well-known New Zealand comedy actor who's in Flight of the Conchords, played the band manager. He's one of my main characters in my head, and I picture him not only as the character, but I picture when I do the dialogue, I try and imagine, because I'm such a big fan of his, I try and imagine how he would say that dialogue in terms of tone and then I try and copy that and put that on the page. I've got another character who's based on Peter Dinklage, and I do the same thing with him. So I can always picture these people. One of my female characters is based on a rather hot porn star, so that made describing her pretty easy. But these are just things I use to help me picture certain characters and work out their behaviours and stuff. I don't know if you do anything like that, or what are the things that you do, or do you just literally sit and write it and kind of wing it?
Well, I wouldn't say wing it is necessarily the word. I'd say, well, a heavy amount of it happens in my head. Now, you could say, however, I mean, is that a good technique, bad technique? But a lot of the initial creation process takes place just in my head, like those first drafts, those first concepts. So ultimately when I'm writing, a lot of times what it feels like happening is I'm kind of creating the story kind of like as a movie scene, but it exists in my head. So part of the writing process is sort of feels like I'm taking a movie that only I know, that only exists in my head, and kind of transcribing it into the page. Now, I do have other techniques, like, for example, for those who can see background, like I've got over my shoulder a whiteboard on my wall. Now, when I first moved into this room, what my ideal situation would have liked to put up whiteboard paint on my walls, so my entire wall could be just a giant whiteboard to write on. But that, at least at the time, I wasn't aware of how to do that. So eventually I just got a whiteboard. Like the sticky notes also, like I mentioned, one of the stories that I'd worked on that had that universe document, like the stickies on my wall have been up there for years that I'm hoping to get back to eventually. But that's kind of like a basic idea of potential stories for the main character, and kind of a potential timeline of events that might have happened in this character's history. But for example, the whiteboard, if I'm having difficulty figuring out certain story elements, or trying to pan out a story, something I might do is I go to the whiteboard and I write down these various ideas and kind of gives me a little room to try and, okay, how can I put pieces together?
Yeah, it's like putting all the pieces of the jigsaw on the wall and seeing how they fit. A lot of people do a similar technique with postcards, and they put headings on postcards with different scenes or key action moments or whatever it might be, put them out on the floor, and then kind of work out the running order of them, and then go away and kind of write it in that order,
Yeah, I did something. I mean, I did something kind of similar with another book that's in production. It's going to be a while before it's finally ready, but as I was going through, I eventually got to where after kind of the first draft, when I was going back through this draft, I wrote out the details of each chapter onto a note card. And so I can look at these note cards to help me figure out what kind of changes do I want to make the story? What kind of shifts do I need to maybe move chapters around, and that kind of thing?
Yeah, sure. It's very handy for keeping track of what goes where, and
and there's also an element where sometimes writing things down helps you put things into a new perspective, where if you're looking at it, it helps give it a bit more grounding versus if it is in my head, if it's not as solid, it's like it can kind of slip or it can shift, and it can sometimes be hard to lock onto.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. The actual process of somebody writing notes on a card, don't underestimate how that physical process gets your brain working. Because as opposed to somebody sitting in front of a computer and having lots of ideas rattling around in their head, and then they try to start typing something and it doesn't quite work, and they go back to the beginning again. And if you get 20 cards and you just, okay, what are your 20 strongest ideas for this book, or what are the 20 scenes that you know are going to be in your book, and you just give each one of those moments a heading. Robot finds other robot gets repaired, robot discovers who the big bad guy robot is. I'm theorizing here, of course, but within your kind of genre. Those will become headings on the cards. Then you're writing notes about those scenes under those headings. It all becomes a physical process that you're committing to doing, and it gets your brain working in a different way than if you're just sitting at your desk. So doing the same thing on a whiteboard, exactly the same. That's why you see massive whiteboards in the writers' rooms for all the big TV shows, you know, when they get together and they're spinning ideas. That's exactly what they do, and they put them all up on the board and start moving them around. It's a very
or as I mentioned, if I'd known how to do it at the time, I mean, all the walls of my room would just be one giant whiteboard, so I could just write over whatever wall I want to have lots of brainstorming room.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, brainstorming is good. I mean, that's also the benefit of bouncing ideas with other people. Miss Sparkles says, interesting cover. Trust me, from her, that is a compliment. And I used to want to be a writer. Why no longer, Miss Sparkles? On the subject of writing, in terms of the speed, when you commit to writing for a day, how many hours do you spend? What's a block of writing for you, and how many pages do you turn out in that time typically?
I don't have a solid process in that regard. This predominantly because I have to work around other commitments, and while I do want to primarily be a writer, at this point in my life, I haven't yet crossed over where I can actually financially support myself on it. So I have to work around constraints such as a day job, so I don't live as a starving artist, or as I mentioned, I live with my grandma as kind of in-home caretaker. So it comes down to what can I figure out to make the writing work. Though when I do find out, rather than work out pages, what I look at is how many words can I pump out. Like with the rewriting of this, I'm thinking, can I get at least 1,000 pages written today? Can I get at least 2,000 pages written? 2,000 words, not 1,000 words. Yeah, 1,000 pages. That'd be pretty incredible.
1,000 pages, but I don't think you'll be able to do. You'd be using a robot or AI to do 1,000 pages. But
yeah. Can I get 1,000 words written? Can I get 2,000 words written? So
the most pages I've written in a single day is for either a script or a book, I think is 22 or 24, something like that.
Yeah.
And I was under pressure to deliver by a certain date, and I turned it around really, really quickly. So I was writing at incredible speed. But that wasn't hard. The hard part was all the grammar and the grammaticals and typos. When you're going at that speed, it's absolutely riddled with them, because that's not your focus. Your focus is the story, and the character.
I will say one of the downsides that, while there's a lot of nice stuff about being able to just have, being able to work in a sense, kind of work as my own boss, and this, there's a lot of freedom involved with where I'm at. But one of the big trade-offs that I find is that when there is a set deadline, rather than a deadline I'm trying to set myself, there is a lot more motivation there to try and get something out by that deadline and not miss that deadline, versus if I'm my own boss, if I'm setting my own deadlines, well, it becomes a lot easier to excuse myself if I don't hit that deadline.
Yeah, I mean, that is very important. And as a writer, you're technically a freelance writer, where it's not your primary goal, but it's a goal you'd like to achieve if you could. And being quite hard on yourself in terms of time is and deadlines, and also just actually how much you write is quite hard. It's very easy to be lazy. It's very easy to let's go on the PlayStation, or I'm gonna stop browsing YouTube, and the next thing you know, 4 hours have gone by. I think you have to commit to, today is a writing day. I'm going to write something, even if it's crap. I'm not going to sit at the computer wondering what I'm going to do. And what is the strongest thing in my head that I can tackle right now? That chapter that's probably near the end of the book, but that scene, I know what's going to happen in that scene. Okay, I'm going to do that. And, even though it might not chronologically be where you're at right now, if that's something that's clear in your head, that's this piece of advice I give to people all the time when I'm doing writing workshop. Write the scene or the moment in a book, a play, or a film that is clearest in your head first, the thing that you can really visualize, the thing that you can really see, you can hear it, you can smell it, you know exactly what it is. Write that first. And then that process of doing that bit first will lead to the next one and the next one and the next one, the one before it or the one that comes after it, wherever it might be in the chronology. That's a good piece of advice, trust me.
Yeah, I think I've heard it's different, but a similar piece of advice that I've found useful is that when you're getting the first draft written, like the first draft onto the page, that first draft is about getting a completed work. It doesn't have to be good, but if you can get that first draft and just focus on getting a completed book, you will have something to work from. You will have a guideline, a written guideline from which to go forward. And it's like you can take this initial draft, you can see what's good, what's bad, what do I need to change, and you can go from there. And especially if you consider that for a lot of people, the most difficult part is actually getting a book written. Well, if you just focus on actually getting a project completed, even if it's not a good product to begin with, and frankly, there are very few people who can actually pop out a first draft project that is actually good to go right there. But so if you can focus on that first draft, just getting it done, and then worry about a completed, finalized version with the second, third, or however many draft, well, I think that gets you over the primary hurdle of actually getting something completed.
Yeah, I think getting to the end of the first draft is always, that's the major milestone. Everybody often says, or you'll hear it said, everybody's got one good book in them. The question is whether you can actually just sit down and write it. And getting to the end of the first draft is always the hardest bit. A lot of people start writing books, they never finish them. A lot of people set out to write a trilogy of books, they do 2, but they don't do the third one or the fourth one or whatever. Just ask George R.R. Martin about that. The biggest culprit of them all.
And he's actually gotten out several books. It's just
but not the ending.
It's completing what he intended to complete, and he's actually getting paid for it.
Yeah, I know. And he's getting paid a lot of money. He really should sit down and finish it. Above all other television projects and whatever else he may have going on, he really should just sit down and spend a year finishing it. But that's a topic for another day.
That's an entirely different conversation.
But you're right though. It's that first draft is the big major hurdle. And again, my advice to any people watching this, and there are some people watching this who want to write a book but haven't, is just keep writing. Even if you think what you're writing is crap, just keep writing, get to the end, keep going, commit to doing a certain number of hours a week. Don't commit to writing every day, because most of you will probably have responsibilities like children, partners, other jobs that won't allow you to do that every day. So don't set a weekly goal that you can't commit to or you can't achieve. Set a goal that's achievable for you within your schedule, and try and hit that every week. And even if you write rubbish, at least you've written rubbish, because writing rubbish is better than writing nothing. And once you get to the end of your first draft, even if the first draft is rubbish, the second draft will be way, way, way better, because now you're in a different process. Now you're trimming and shaping and reorganizing, but the bones are there. So once you've got the bones, sorting out the flesh and where it all goes, it becomes a lot easier. It's still a long process, but that is the hardest hurdle without a doubt.
Yeah, I know it's been said like getting the book written is the hardest part, but I don't have like a huge body of work, but I've written enough material that for me it becomes, no, writing it isn't the hardest part, selling it is the hardest part. And then with that, when I look at, what I look at is you're never, I mean, as long as you are physically and mentally able, it's never too old enough to get started. Like a modern example of this is if you think to Alan Rickman, it's my understanding that when he actually when he really got started acting and really became a big name, he was already like in his 30s or 40s. And then with what time he had, he became a big deal. So, I mean, other examples through history, you have U.S. Grant, who if he had died before he was 40, he'd be probably a footnote in history. If you want to go further back, like historically, Moses, he was like in his 80s before he did the stuff he really became famous for. But as long as you're physically and mentally able, it is never too late to get started or finish that project. Now, you don't want to put it off forever, but at the same time, just because you've got a lot of years behind you, that doesn't mean it's too late to get started.
No, indeed. I mean, we could do a whole different stream about how to market a book. And in fact, I think I probably will do a stream on that topic. And I might invite all the authors to come back on that I've interviewed in 2025. There's probably about half a dozen of you.
I will say, marketing is one of my major weak points, which is another reason why, for me, there's more appeal of the hybrid process versus the self-publishing process, where ostensibly they're going to be incentivized to try and get my book sold as well, even though I still want to be doing things like, for example, this stream and other podcasts.
Absolutely.
Try and let people know my book exists, but at least I get this sense that I'm not just out there solo trying to take care of all the salesmanship stuff.
Yeah. Well, before we begin to wrap up, just gone over the hour mark. I told you these things go really quickly. Before we begin to wrap up, who in your mind, because you said yourself when you were visualizing this, it was kind of almost like it was going to be a movie. And of course, you're a big Star Wars fan as well, so you've got a lot of visual nuts and bolts rattling around in your science fiction noggin there. Who would you say are the people that are going to enjoy this book? Who's the target demographic of this story, and why should people go onto Amazon and buy Junkworld, the Ballad of Leroy Brown?
Well, that would unfortunately fall under another part of the weakness in marketing, because when I can kind of, in the clearest sense, the best I can say is, well, I'm hoping, fans of science fiction will enjoy this. Or if I were to put a more specific target, like two of the primary works that I think of that played into the creation of this book would be either BattleBots, which I've been a big fan of since it really made its comeback. Over on your side of the world, you've got the Robot Wars variation, and then like the movie Real Steel. I remember Real Steel. Yeah, all that robot combat stuff. So there is a certain element in there where there's a connection, and that played an influence. But yeah, marketing is very much one of my weaknesses. So when I think, I have a lot of challenge of figuring out, okay, who am I specifically trying to make this appeal to, which also comes from the problem of, well, the book needs to be what it needs to be. Like I said with the length, well, there's a certain, however long the book is, it needs to be as long. Yeah, admittedly, it's a cyclical statement, but the book needs to be as long as it needs to be to tell the story it is telling. And so I have a challenge with, how do I figure out, okay, what am I specifically going to change about, what specific parts of this book am I specifically going to alter or put in a certain direction that can help make it appeal to a certain audience while still keeping the book true to what it needs to be?
Yeah, I would try and break that down succinctly, because it's good to practice pretending you're going into a room full of 50 people that might want to buy your book, and you've got 90 seconds to convince them to pick it up from, let's say, a selection of 10 other books. And and I haven't, for the benefit of people watching, I haven't read Junkworld, the Ballad of Leroy Brown, because as people will know, I don't have time to read the novels of all the novelists I bring on. But I do read bits, and I do read the overview, because if I don't think the book is sounds interesting to me, then how am I going to talk about it sincerely on my channel? And I do think this book sounds interesting, and I would articulate it that if you like the banter between C-3PO and R2-D2 in Star Wars, then imagine a book entirely from a droid's narrative who's stranded on a planet and finds himself facing a task of insurmountable odds when another droid who dominates the world decides to take a dislike to him. Now, that might be an inaccurate synopsis of your book. I don't know.
I will say,
but it makes it sound appealing. Do you see what I just did there?
I can see what you're aiming for. I'd say that the closest I get to real marketing is when for example, with this, what I wrote for the back cover. Like the back cover, the overview is me trying to sell the plot of this. Yeah, like you can see right there. Junkworld, a planet for discarded machines. Fresh off his latest victory, it is here that champion fighting robot Leroy Brown inexplicably finds himself. Certain his presence on Junkworld is a mistake, Leroy makes it his mission to go home. Enter the Top Dog. A tyrant determined to conquer all of Junkworld, the Top Dog demands Leroy's capture for reasons known only to himself. This mysterious focus on Leroy ensures it is only a matter of time before Leroy's mission to return home intertwines with the fight against the Top Dog. But just when Leroy shows he may be the best hope Junkworld has, his entire world threatens to collapse with devastating consequences.
Fantastic. So what I would make as a goal of yours for 2026 is to find someone, unless you can do it yourself, of course, find someone who knows how to use AI art programs. Create probably a selection of, I would say, 12 very strong concept images in the similar vein to your cover, similar kind of color, tone, that kind of thing, of your main character and of the Top Dog character and of the world that they inhabit. A bit like the Ralph McQuarrie Star Wars concept art. But now anybody can create this stuff. It's being used for pitch packs, for TV shows and films, daily now. If you can get someone to create 12 of those, get an actor, or again, you can even get AI to do it. I shouldn't say that because, of course, all my actor friends will hate me. Get an actor to re-record what you just said, Junkworld, a planet for discarded machines, and kind of do it like that. And then have that running with your 12 pieces of artwork on 60 seconds, because you can probably do that on 60 seconds. Then boom, you've got a trailer for your book to upload to TikTok, YouTube, all the platforms, link to the book underneath. I bet you'll see some results from that.
It's definitely something it's something worth at least considering and looking into trying something like that.
I'll tell you now, that'd be money well spent. If you have to pay someone $200 to make you 12 really strong images, make sure it's someone that's not going to rip you off. And there are people out there with established reputations that can do this kind of thing and have got bona fide reviews online and stuff like that. Do your research. Don't pick any old sod. But that'd be $200 well spent. I reckon you'll see a result with that if you can put it around everywhere and get people to share it. I will share it if you create it. I'll put it all over my social media if you create something like that. So just get back in touch with me and let me know. Well, Michael, we've come to the end of our time. I've gone slightly over actually, but it's been great having you on. I really like the sound of this book. I think fans of science fiction will enjoy it. So far, it's got nice ratings on Amazon. Order it from Amazon.com if you're in the States. Order it from Amazon.co.uk, of course, if you're in the UK. And please, if you do buy the book and you read it, don't forget to leave a review. These reviews are absolutely vital. Can't tell you how important they are.
Yeah, I can absolutely say, even if it only has a handful of reviews right now, the fact that what reviews it does have are all 5-star, that's an indicator that I'm doing something right because the people who are reading it, who do care to rate it, do really like it. It's just a matter of luring in the audience.
That's right. So, I mean, like I say, we'll do a separate stream about marketing another time, but I'll leave you with this thought, which would be I would join science fiction writing groups, whether they're on Facebook or Reddit, stuff like that. Don't just come in there like a bulldozer and start talking about your book straight away. Engage with people, see what they're talking about, talk to them about other topics first. Do that for a few months before you even say, hey, by the way, I've got a sci-fi book. So put out the help before you ask for it in return. And then you will probably get people engaging with you if you do it that way round and willing to support you, get your book, put reviews on. This is my latest book for the few that probably haven't heard about it already, which is autobiographical, which is Back to Raving at 50. This dropped in October. I've got 10 reviews now on amazon.co.uk. I've got a few extra ones on amazon.com. The latest review just came to my attention the other day, dropped on the 11th of December by Keith Hull. This is a wicked review, Keith. Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it. I'm not sure if we've met in person. I don't think we have. And all but 2 of the 10 reviews that are on here are all from people that I don't know. And I'm doing a similar thing with that. I'm engaging with people in that world, and was in that world for a while before I kind of asked people to support me. I supported people's events and that kind of thing. Electric Goat is asking if your book is available on a platform that isn't Amazon. Is there anywhere else people can get it?
My understanding is that it should be available through any of the major platforms. Like if you prefer, you could get it on Barnes & Noble. You could get it through Walmart. Where I primarily point people is to Goodreads to look it up because
Goodreads
because a major part of Goodreads is that it includes a link to book sales websites where you can choose whatever of those major websites to pick it up. So yes, it is definitely available to purchase through platforms. If it were made into a movie, I think to realistically make it, it would have to be animated, because even if you got live actors, you'd have all the live actors wearing costumes that would hide who they are. So it would absolutely be better to do it as an animated movie.
Yeah, I'd see this as something along the lines of WALL-E, that kind of vibe.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, because there's actually a minor character in the book who, you might not see it if you're not looking. You might not see it if you're not looking for it, but if you know it's there, you'll probably notice there is a character in the book that pulls a definite inspiration from WALL-E.
Oh, that's interesting. I forgot about this, actually. That Amazon bought Goodreads. That's right,
when did that happen?
Yeah, they did. They bought Goodreads.
I think
this is the first time it was either earlier this year or late last year that happened.
Okay, well that would make a difference. So
yeah, I like Chappie. Chappie, that's a good movie. I like Chappie.
Yeah. Okay, well, even if Goodreads doesn't point to other sites anymore, based on my last knowledge, admittedly this could be out of date, but it should be available through other sites like Barnes & Noble, Walmart.
If someone has difficulties obtaining the book there, they still want to get a copy from you, can they engage with you on social media? Maybe they can send you money, you can send them one directly. Is that doable? It's unorthodox.
It's unfortunately another part of my marketing weakness, because I'm not really good with social.
Okay, look at that. She's found it. There you go.
She's
found it on Barnes & Noble, so we don't need to go down that road. Fantastic. Yeah, there you go. You got a sale. You got a sale today already.
Well, there you go. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
All right. Look.
Yeah. When I've purchased copies of, when I've done my own purchasing of my own copies, I've primarily used Barnes & Noble myself. So I absolutely understand trying to find a website other than Amazon.
Yeah, no, I hear you, and not everybody gets my book books from Amazon. So again, the Junkworld, the Ballad of Leroy Brown. It's the first book from M K Stangeland Jr, no less.
Definitely not the last.
Definitely not the last, indeed.
I have other books in the work. One that's very close to being published, though it's a very different genre and audience because it's more of a children's fairy tale. But I do have other books in the work. This is absolutely not going to be my last book, and I can't say how long it's going to be, but I do expect there to be other works of science fiction, works of fantasy coming in the future.
All right. Well, look, thanks very much for coming on, Michael. Just going to remind everybody that this is the second from last industry interview of the year. We've got one more with Mauler, no less, quite a well-known YouTuber, and we're going to be specifically talking about his career and how it all started, and very much looking at the whole kind of YouTube world. And funnily enough, although I've had guests of YouTube come on before, I've never done an interview like that. So I think that's going to be really interesting. To remind everybody, tomorrow in a sort of a change of the normal programming for our Tuesday 10 o'clock show, we're going to do a special dedication episode to the late great Rob Reiner, looking at the films that he either wrote or directed or both, and also his acting career as well, following his tragic loss this weekend gone. Just awful news what happened there. And certainly he's a filmmaker that inspired me, and also got a mention, many mentions actually, in my my film book, Silver Screen Journeys. Rob Reiner is I think he's got 2 or 3 films in there from my list. So that's it from us today. Thanks very much for my guests for coming on and giving up their time, chatting with me about their great book. Thank you to everybody in the chat. We've had quite an active chat in here, and also a few people I haven't seen for a while. Electric Goat, it's really good to see you. Do try and come on my channel on the 30th when we're doing the best and the worst of the year. It'd be great to have you on there as part of the panel. Dave Savage is a writer who I actually helped with a script of his. He hired me to go through it with him and sort of do a breakdown and see what could be improved and stuff like that. So great that you also tuned in. See, other writers always come into these streams. It's always interesting. So, and good to see a couple of other familiar names, and also some of the people that subscribed to the channel recently. I am nearly at 6,000 subscribers. I would love to get there before New Year's Day. I think I need about another 200. So guys, if you can share the love for the channel, that'd be great. Tell people about it, or even better, do a little post about it on your own social media. I would appreciate that. If you have a friend or family member, preferably somebody that you like, who has got a creative project of their own, then don't be afraid to put them in touch with me. If it's something I'm interested in and I can help promote for them, I'll get them on the channel and I'll do an interview for them in 2026 at some stage. I've already got about 6 interviews lined up for the first 2 months of 2026 with some pretty big name guests as well. So lots of exciting stuff lined up ahead. So that's it from us. Thanks very much, everyone, for tuning in. I will see you all again tomorrow at 10 o'clock UK time, 5 p.m. East Coast. Bye.
Interviews with fellow artists on the rise, and reviews that might surprise. Film, TV shows, some